What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hogmolly Hustle. Before we get started, I want to say if you happen to stick around and you like what we say or you don't like what we say, either way, leave a comment, like, subscribe, do all those nice things so you can stick around and hear all the other stuff we say. Today we got a lot to talk about. Not the most exciting week of the NFL, in my opinion. There's a lot of cool stuff that happened in college football, which you'll see in a couple of the key games that we recapped for college football. First up, we have. Well, I guess I don't want to be rude. How are you today, Austin?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Caleb?
Pretty good. I had to dye my hair yellow today for Spirit Week, so that was nice. But now that I got that out of my hair, I'm feeling a lot better. Okay, so let's just start with the NFL, then we'll move to college football. That way, just keep it all together. Probably the most exciting game, in my opinion, was the Bills and Titans. It didn't go the way I thought it was going to. There were some calls at the end that some could question. I thought the Bills were probably going to run away with this one because I wasn't sure if the Titans were all that going into this. And we know the Buffalo Bills were rolling, and they were rolling in this game. But King Henry is a freak of nature. I mean, he's just a beast. I mean, he had that 170-some yard run where he just ran at the middle and like nobody stopped him. And he's just, when he gets rolling, he's unstoppable. And he to me, and I know it's all in the moment and living in the moment here, but when you just look at what he does at this point in his career, he's probably the most dominant offensive player that I've ever watched. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say. When I think about Derrick Henry, I don't know if there's another running back that has his body style and skill set in NFL history. I mean, we've seen great backs come through this league. We've seen power backs. We've seen more athletic guys. Eric Dickerson comes to mind. Earl Campbell, Barry Sanders, all these different guys, all these different legends. But, I mean, as powerful of a runner as Jim Brown was, he wasn't doing the things that Derrick Henry's doing, running through entire defenses. And so, yeah, I mean, Derrick is a one-of-a-kind guy. I'm not saying that he's the best running back of all time or anything like that, but just his body style and his ability is – it's like he's Jerome Bettis but a foot taller. He has the thighs of a Christian Okoye, but he's relatively fast for the position. And I think the biggest thing for me is that he's actually improved in the passing game. I mean, you see him catching the ball out of the backfield, which is huge. I mean, that adds an entire other dimension to the Titans offense. And so if he can continue to do that, he's currently on pace to break the single season rushing record. So that's something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, and I think you don't bring up Jerome Bettis, and I looked at it as I don't think he has the top end speed of Adrian Peterson, but he's bigger, and he's not slow. I mean, he runs I don't know what he runs now, probably 4.5 ish. Maybe in his prime ran like a 4.4, which is scary for somebody that big. Like, that's ridiculous. But to be that athletic, that big, and to take all the abuse and all the hits he's taken and all the hits he's given, and to still be rolling at this point, it's just amazing. And he just makes big professional football players look like little kids sometimes. Not every time. And we've seen the Titans be shut down. And when you stop that run game, you stop the Titans. But, man, is Derrick Henry fun to watch. I mean, there are very few players that when they leave, I'm like, we won't see somebody like that for a while. But, man, I'm going to dread the day when, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, whenever he starts losing it, that's going to be unfortunate. But, man, for right now, I enjoy every second of watching Derrick Henry.
Imagine being a Titans fan and going from Chris Johnson, the beginning of last decade, to Derrick Henry now. They're kind of polar opposites, right? Chris Johnson's super quick. I mean, one of the fastest guys in NFL history, and Derrick Henry's the guy that looks in you in your eyes and say, "I'm going to run over you," and then just proceeds to be a bowling ball and the opposing team's defense is all the pins.
Yeah. How many 2,000-yard rushers have the Titans had? That's
That's a
pretty.
good question.
I gotta have to look that up.
They have to have one of the richer franchise histories in that category, I would say.
You got to think, right? I mean, you got Earl Campbell, who was, a lot like Derrick Henry as far as just the brutality goes, and that took a big impact on him later on. But he was taking some heavy neck shots, and we'll get into neck shots a little bit later in the podcast. But no, that game, the decision there, they say, why quarterbacks sneak it there on the goal line. There's other plays you could have called there. What do you think about how that game ended?
Well, the thing that I think about in that fourth quarter is the decision that McDermott had to go for it on short yardage. Could have kicked a field goal, sent it into overtime. I think that Sean McDermott is one of the most underrated head coaches in the NFL. As a Panthers fan, I watched him as our defensive coordinator come up with game plan after game plan that really saved our tails in several different occasions. And I knew he would have success in Buffalo. I just didn't know how long it would take. I think that his decision to go for it on Monday night was a wise decision. I think that if they kick that field goal and they do make it, all it takes for Tennessee to win is to get the ball back, because I don't think any defense in the NFL could stop Derrick Henry from just bulldozing his way to a touchdown. And so, even if you stack the box, A.J. Brown was having a great game as well. So that decision was the right decision. I don't think that the play call was the right decision, just a typical quarterback sneak. I get that Josh Allen is one of the big quarterbacks in the league. He's kind of like Peyton Manning. All he has to do is stick that neck out there, and he's going to get a first down. But all it takes is for one defensive tackle to decide that they're going to crash a gap, and it doesn't work. So I've never been a huge fan of the QB sneak, unless it is literally inches that you have to get, and you really, really trust your interior offensive lineman. So it is what it is. I thought that the Bills would be able to get that road victory, but Titans are hanging tough, man.
Yeah. Did you hear about Chris Broussard and why the Bills couldn't score that last touchdown?
No, what did he say?
He said, and the Bills, I don't know why the Bills called that play when they had their starting left tackle, Taylor Lewan, out on injury. You got this guy, so whoever Dawkins is, playing at left tackle. and they try to call this play. And I think, man, this guy's making more than I'll ever make. He doesn't even know who he's talking about.
Well, I think the worst thing about Broussard is that he's basically an NBA guy, but he doesn't even know much about the NBA.
Yeah. But these guys get in the position they are in because they're better than us. So let's just live with it, I guess. But speaking of and then speaking of Taylor Lewan and the injury, it was a scary neck injury. You always hate to see that, but I mean, I don't know what he was doing, man. I mean, there was a pile up there, and it just seemed, I don't know if he tripped, but it looked like he just kind of threw himself on the pile, and his neck just went and hit. And when I saw all that weight come down, I thought, that's a lot of weight going down on the top of your neck right there, and that's dangerous. And it was scary.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who has played football, one of the fun things to do is just, you see a pile of people, and you just get this itch to go be a part of that, right? And so,
people's elbow.
Yeah. And so I feel like his intention when he first saw the pile was, okay, well, I'm going to go be a battering ram, and I'm going to just hit the pile 100 miles an hour and give my running back the momentum and get an extra couple yards. Or maybe he was just hoping to pancake, one of the Bills players. I'm not sure what his exact intentions were, but anytime you lead with the crown of your helmet and go airborne, and you are 320 pounds, it's a scary thing to see. All it takes is for one person to move out of the way, or several things could go wrong there. And the benefit of it, what are you going to do? Get an extra yard?
Yeah.
Maybe 2 yards?
And from what I could remember, the play was pretty much already done. Like, they were going to the ground, and when he went down, there's no gain to be had there. I mean, maybe you're wanting to hurt somebody. I hope that's not the case, but I really can't see what you're doing there. And it doesn't take much to break these vertebrae up here in terms of, like, the force it takes to break onto that. I'm not a, physiologist. I don't really know all the ins and outs, but I do know that I've seen Nick Collins, I've seen Jermichael Finley, I've seen players take what looks like not major hits, and it breaks something. It's just very scary to see, and when I saw that, it did not look good. You saw the instant wince on his face, and moral of the story, don't dive on a pile unless you're leading with the elbow.
Seriously.
So
I looked up the 2,000-yard rushers in NFL history.
Okay.
This is according to Wikipedia, so our listeners take this with a grain of salt. But you got O.J. Simpson. You have Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders, Terrell Davis, Jamal Lewis, Chris Johnson, Adrian Peterson, and Derrick Henry. So
has Derrick Henry only done it once?
I believe so. Right?
I know he got really close.
Yeah.
I know he got really close. All right, let's go ahead and move on to a couple more of these games here. So that's a lot of Titans talk there.
Remember the Titans.
Remember the Titans, and we did. We talked about them a lot. So moving on to Purdue and Iowa. This is something I didn't really expect to happen. We did talk about when we were looking at how the Final Four might end up. We talked about Iowa and when are they going to have a classic Iowa game where they should win, but then something happens and they lose a game they really shouldn't. And this week they lost a game they probably shouldn't have won. No offense to the Boilermakers, but they probably shouldn't have lost to Purdue. Now, I'm sure Coach Tassett was happy with this one.
Yeah.
But Iowa going down 24-7, if I remember correctly, not great. Not great for Iowa. That's going to really hurt them. I think that probably going to knock them out of the Final Four. I can't imagine they get back in unless they beat Ohio State and really run the table.
They would have to win out. It feels like they would have to win out and win their conference championship to be considered.
Yeah, which is well, we'll see what happens.
It's a tall task. They're dealing with injuries in their secondary. You hate it for Iowa because that was a home game. That's something that, it's a game that they feel like they should have won. And offense couldn't get going in the first half. It was just a snowball game.
Yeah, definitely one of those games you mentioned. Snowball is a good way of talking about it, where just things kept piling on, and sometimes you overcome the adversity, and sometimes it just catches up to you, and there's not much you can do. The momentum keeps rolling. Got anything else to add to that one?
No, just I hate it because I was really wanting to see Iowa in the CFP.
Yeah, I thought it was their year. And who knows? It could still be. They could run the table from here. They're really going to have to book it going forward to get back in. But, man, that was a tough loss. That was a very surprising loss for me. So, another one that might be surprising to some people, I thought it was going to be a Georgia win, and it was a Georgia win. I didn't think they were going to dominate in the way they did. I thought they were going to win by maybe a score or two, 14 points. But they dominated this game. And this shows the difference between two 6-0 SEC teams coming together, Georgia, Kentucky, and Georgia just dominated. And there's a lot of things to look at. That defense is ridiculous. Like I said at the beginning of our podcasting season, that defense, that front seven, best in the country. That defense overall, might be best in the country. Now, that secondary is where you have some issues because they lost a lot of guys, like 3 corners to the NFL. That's tough to replenish. But with that front seven, I mean, I might be able to go out there and play corner. I'm just joking. I couldn't do that. That's a lot of running. But that front seven, they got like 9 guys rotating in there. They got 3 defensive tackles that rotate in, and they're not big boy Jordan Davis. But it has some guys that are a little bit smaller rotating in, making some big plays, and they just got so many great defensive plays. It is ridiculous how good that defense is. And I'm really excited to see what happens. They are, to me, hands down the best defense in college football. I mean, it's not even close, in my opinion, which is crazy to say.
This with Stetson Bennett as their quarterback too.
Yeah,
and I mean he was tremendous against Kentucky. 14 of 20 for 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So I mean,
and that one touchdown in the corner of the end zone was a dime. That was a fantastic throw. And while we're talking about quarterback, this brings up the question: what's going to happen when JT Daniels can return to play? Because last year Bennett wasn't very good for Georgia, but this year he's a whole lot better. At least he looks like he's a whole lot better. And people question his accuracy compared to JT Daniels, but he brings a mobility that JT Daniels does not have. And will they try to use both quarterbacks for a while until somebody wins the job? It's going to be a real big question for who you want to lead your team going into what will eventually be the college football playoffs. So a real big question there for Georgia. Do you have something to say, or you just?
I'm sorry, I got an email, so I was Xing out of that on my computer. No, I think that for me, you bring in Daniels to be your starter, right? So I feel like if he is 100% healthy and he does come back, then I don't think that Stetson is doing anything so remarkable that it would be stupid to sit him. I think that he's been definitely the last 2 weeks. He looks more comfortable in that offense. I think that he's starting to develop better relationships with the receivers, and I mean they're clicking on all cylinders. But I still think that he probably isn't the best quarterback on that team from a talent perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think what we could be seeing here, and it's very possible, that we could be seeing the backup quarterback effect, where you see the number 2 guy come in there, wins a couple of games, wins a few games, looks really good, but then when push comes to shove, they'll eventually have a game where they don't look so good, and it's like, man, I wish we had our starter in. So I would probably agree that JT Daniels is probably going to come back in, be the starter like he was supposed to be, and then if something happens, you bring Bennett back in. But then you always have the question of what's that going to do to Bennett when he's feeling so good. So it's a very interesting situation. And I think that quarterback position is something that Georgia, for whatever reason, has had a trouble filling over the years. They've always had great everything else. They have like 3 halfbacks. 2 of them at least will be in the NFL. Their defensive 7, there's so many of those that's going to be in the NFL. And this team is just stacked. 3 of their cornerbacks went to the NFL last year, defensive backs. Like, this team is always loaded year in and year out. And they just got to get this quarterback position right. Now they have 2 guys that could potentially lead them to the promised land. And now you got to choose who's going to be the one. So that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch for Georgia with major implications.
Especially given the fact that Justin Fields was there and then ultimately decided to transfer. I feel like 10, 15 years from now, we're going to look back at that Georgia team, and that's going to be the one that got away from the Dogs for sure.
Yeah, no disrespect to Jake Fromm. He maintained that job as well as anybody could, fighting off any competition he had coming in. That was pretty impressive. But when you just talk about talent from a talent perspective, it's not even close, Fromm and Fields. But in that system, Fromm was definitely the guy that was running it better. Okay. If you don't have anything to add, I'm going to go on to a brand new segment. Also, the weekly beatdown of the Giants happened to be the Rams dropping bodies off in New Jersey, which was nice to see. But that Giants team really struggling. They're letting me down because if I were a betting man, I would have put some money on the Giants this year. But I'm not, so I'm not any money. Dropping bodies. But fake or for real? This is a new segment I got. You ready for this?
Let's do it.
In this segment, we're going to talk about some teams that are on the up and up right now. And then we're going to figure out who's fake and who's for real. That's Furreal, by the way, just so you know, if anybody needs some clarification. Okay. The first team I got, this is one that's kind of shocked me. I think your dog wants to hop in here. But the first one I got here is the Bengals at 4-2. Okay? The Bengals are surprising me. I did not think at this point, with some of the problems they had, that at 4-2, at this point in the season, didn't expect that. The Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow connection is very hot right now. It's seamless from college to the pros. And their key games, they got the Ravens twice, the Browns twice, the Chargers at home, and the Chiefs at home. Those are two big games to have at home. So what do you think? Bengals, are they for real? Or are they fake?
I think the Bengals are going to be for real eventually, but I think that for now they're a bit of a faker. I honestly think that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase might have the best quarterback-receiver relationship for a rookie and a second-year vet that the NFL has ever seen. And obviously they were teammates at LSU, had a very fruitful relationship at LSU, winning the national championship, and Joe Burrow having, in my opinion, the best college football season of all time. So you love what you see with that offense. Joe Burrow's dropping dimes to Jamar Chase. You got Boyd and Higgins getting involved. Mixon's one of the better running backs that no one talks about in the NFL. Super versatile in that offense. Their offensive line could still use some work. And I think that their defense still needs to add pieces in the offseason. But with the Steelers kind of taking a step back and becoming the old team on the block, and with the Browns having some uncertainty with Baker's shoulder, I think that the Bengals could be sticking around, but I don't view them as a serious threat in that division and in the playoffs.
Yeah. And you talk about adding some additions and bringing some people in, letting some things go, and how they start to bring in some pieces. They did bring in a really good piece for their defense, but we'll get to that a little bit later when we get to shout-outs. And when you mentioned the Browns, there's some uncertainty with Baker's shoulder, but there's also some uncertainty whether or not they'll be able to field a starting lineup in the coming weeks. So we've got a lot of injury concerns. We'll talk about that later as well. I would also think that the Bengals are going to be fakers. They're looking like they're going to have a bright future, but I think that is not right now just yet. There's a lot of good things coming. I was a huge fan of Jamar Chase coming out. I was a huge supporter of him being wide receiver one, even when it was the popular opinion to think Devonta Smith was going to be the guy, the reigning Heisman, which is very understandable. But when you look at what Jamar Chase can do, he is just ridiculously talented for a rookie receiver. I'm not sure if I've seen a receiver come in and just play as well as he has. We had Justin Jefferson last year come in. But now that Jamar Chase is in, it is just electrifying to watch and terrifying to watch if your team is on defense against the Bengals. So definitely a lot to look at in the Bengals. I do think they're a faker right now. If I had to say, and you can chime in here, 9-8, 8-9, that's around the range I expect them to finish. And they could end up in that 10-win with the new schedule, the my expectations are a little bit off here. I'm going to have to take me a while to get used to that. But I guess, I don't know, is middling, is that anywhere from like 9 and 8 to 10 and whatever? Is double digits middling now?
Yeah, I think that now the bar to separate yourself as a contender is 11 or 12 wins, right? Um, I mean, going 10-7, I don't think is super telling that you're going to be this juggernaut in the playoffs. Unless you're the Chiefs and you go 10-7, then it might they might stumble upon a bad record and then set the world on fire in January. But
Yeah. So that'll be something to watch here, how that playoffs breaks down, and we'll definitely look at that later. But another team here, we might have differing opinions here, or we might be similar on this one. But the Chargers, also at 4-2. A lot of these teams we're going to talk about are at 4-2. At least three of them are. So the Chargers, 4-2. They had a pretty ugly game against the Ravens this past week. Not their best showing. They have the Chiefs at home. They got to go to Cincinnati, to Denver, and to Las Vegas in Week 18. And those are all pretty key games. The Las Vegas is still playing well after the whole Gruden situation. They picked up a big win this past week. And those games could be pretty telling. The division game, the last week of the season, which a lot of teams have those this year, and that Chiefs game, playing that Chiefs game a second time. If they can beat the Chiefs twice, that's a pretty big pickup for the Chargers. I think the Chargers are for real. They got their quarterback. He's going to keep getting better. I love what he brings to that team. They got all the talent in the world, and if they can stay healthy, there's the caveat, which is the Chargers have always had this issue. But if they can stay healthy, they are absolutely for real.
I think that their bye week comes at the perfect time. Coming off of that embarrassing outing versus the Ravens, I think that they're going to want a week to just kind of regather themselves and look at the game film and just look at what went wrong. A lot of missed assignments in that game. When I think about the Chargers, I don't know if I view them as a team that's for real in the sense of they are a championship contender, but I do think that they are a serious threat for this division and could have some success in the playoffs. I think that the trajectory that I see them on right now is being in a close race with Kansas City for that number one spot in the West to end the season. And, regardless of, I guess we're looking at how that second game shakes out, like you said, and then also how they perform down the stretch against a lot of teams that they should be able to handedly beat. But in the NFL, that's not always the case. So I think that they are a legit playoff team, but I don't buy them as a serious contender.
I think what's going to end up happening, I'm just going to use my future sight here. I'm going to say that both the Bills and the Chargers make playoffs. And I'm going to say that how it breaks down, those teams are going to be playing before the championship, which will be unfortunate because those are two teams that probably should be playing closer to the championship than before that. And hopefully it's not first round. And then you and I are going to be at each other's throats because those are our boys there at quarterback. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. But that's my future sight right there. I'm never wrong with this. So put it in your books. Put some bets on it if you would like to. I can't do that because I'm not a betting man. All right. Next one, the Titans. Picked up a big win against your Bills. We just talked about that as far as the recap goes. Not much to hit on. We've already covered that. Spent a lot of time on the Titans. Who they have left? They have the Dolphins at home, and the Dolphins might be getting somebody that might be playing this year, maybe not. Somebody from Houston. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen there, but there's a story developing. I have no idea what that's going to do. That's either going to make them really bad or really good this year, depending on what happens. If they do get Deshaun Watson, I don't know if he's going to play. And then at that point, if they're trading Tua, I mean, Jacoby Brissett's the guy going forward, and well, I don't know what to expect from that Dolphins team. They
I
got
I've learned to just block out the rumors about Deshaun because since this all started, what, back in February or March, I like at one point the Panthers were the front runner, and then the Eagles supposedly were all in on him, and then the Dolphins were the team. Like, I mean, it's reporters don't know what's going on; they're just throwing around speculation. I'm sure that there are probably discussions going on in the NFL between GMs about potential trades, but until his legal matters get settled, I don't know how that would look unless it was a conditional trade. You know, I think
yeah.
that technically he is eligible to play right now. Um, it's just that the Texans have agreed to sit him, and he's agreed that he's not playing in Houston ever again.
No. So a very interesting thing to watch, and like you say, some people in sports don't really know what they're saying. They just report on what they're hearing or what they think they might be hearing. Some people don't even know who's starting for what teams, but that's just the way it is. So after the Dolphins, which could be an interesting one, you have the Niners. Another interesting one because we don't know what the quarterback situation is looking like for them. But I think if either of their quarterbacks is healthy, that team can be pretty tough to deal with at any point in the season. And then you have a game at Los Angeles versus the Rams. That's a tough one. And then you have the Chiefs at home. That's a good one to have at home. And that's not a terrible. Like the other games they have are not terribly difficult games that they should win. But they also lost games this year that they shouldn't have lost. So the Titans are kind of a mystery, but if they play the way they did against the Buffalo Bills for the rest of the season, they should be finishing out pretty good this season. And I think the Titans are for real.
Okay. I think that the Titans are for real in a sense. Again, I think that they're kind of in the same boat as the Chargers. I think they can definitely be a playoff team, and they should be, given their roster. It's hard for me to put a ton of faith in Ryan Tannehill. You know, if the team that they're facing in the playoffs decides to stack the box, can Tannehill adequately move the ball downfield and throw to his receivers? He has two of the best receivers in the game, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. I don't have a ton of faith in Tannehill, but I do have a lot of faith in Derrick Henry and that offensive line. You know, they obviously lost Lawan. That hurts them tremendously. You know, it's next man up. Everybody's dealing with injuries. You can't make excuses. Just keep running your scheme. And, yeah, I think they can be for real.
You talk about making excuses, yet you have yet to pick a fake or for real without putting stipulations on it. So we're beating around the bush. Let's just choose one. That's what this whole segment's about. Also, you left off one of the most important pieces on that offense, Anthony Firkser, the tight end. So let's not leave him off there. It's kind of disrespectful. You should be ashamed of yourself. But let's move on to the Cardinals. Another team that is, I thought they'd be doing okay at this point. I thought they'd be more in that 4-2 range, but here they are at 6-0, one of the only undefeated. Are they the only undefeated team right now?
Yep, they are the only undefeated team left in the NFL.
And there are all sorts of questions going into the season, like, oh, look at all the retirees they're bringing into a receiving corps. Look at all these people they're bringing in. They got retirees all over the place. J.J. Watt, and of course you got old Chandler Jones. What's he going to do? Drops like 7 sacks in like one of the first 2 weeks. This team is just playing really well. Like a bunch of different positions. They lose Patrick Peterson, and then a whole new era is going to start here. This team is playing really well, and Kyler Murray is playing very, very well. Their halfback situation is not necessarily solidified, but they're just doing really well overall. and it's very surprising. And what they have ahead of them, they have a game with the Packers at home. That's a good one to have at home. They have a game against the Panthers, which I put on there. I don't know if you put that as a big game, but they had the Panthers at home. I think the Panthers have played the Cardinals pretty well in the past. They are playing at the Cowboys. They have the Rams at home, and they have the Seahawks at home at the final week of the season. I mentioned the Seahawks because they're not great right now, but by that time, maybe you have Russell Wilson back. We don't know what's going to happen there with that situation. But if he's back, that's definitely a game they could lose. But they have a lot of important games at home. And the one they got to go away for in that stretch is at Dallas. So that's a pretty favorable schedule. They're not going to go undefeated, obviously, but that's a pretty good schedule. I mean, anywhere from 13 wins, 14 wins is very possible with this team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that they're going to be.
And they're for real, by the way. I'm just going to say that.
They are absolutely for real.
There we go.
Be the team that shines the brightest in this season. Kind of like the Panthers in 2016 or 2015, I guess. The team that just is able to shine above and beyond what they, what you expect of them. And,
is Jared at your house?
Yeah.
I heard him talking next year. But yeah, they go above and beyond what's expected of them. I heard you.
And so, when I think about the Cardinals, you obviously know that their passing game is incredible. And so, looking at their schedule, the teams that they played, the Titans, who we just talked about as being a legit, for real team, they embarrassed in week 1 in Tennessee, 38-13. Got a win over the Vikings, win over the Jaguars. Played at LA and beat them 37-20 handily. Beat the 49ers. Won at Cleveland this past week. I mean, they're for real. I think that they're the team in this segment that is the most for real. They have 194 points for and only 109 points allowed. So you're looking at a point differential of plus 85.
Which is crazy.
That's tremendous, especially in that tough division.
Yeah. The games they're winning without much competition. And I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to end up playing someone like a very talented team, a very veteran-savvy team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the playoffs. And I've told you this. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are very beatable. I think that all their games have been close. And they could have lost almost all of these games, even the one this past week, except for the one where they blew out the Dolphins. But that team's very beatable. But if I'm the Cardinals, that is one of those teams I do not want to play. I think that this Cardinals team is more talented than that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team overall. But when you get a veteran defensive coordinator in the playoffs that has time to plan for a team like the Cardinals, that is a bad matchup. And although I think the Cardinals should, skill-wise, be able to beat the Buccaneers, I think if we see that matchup in the playoffs, that would be very bad for the Cardinals.
That's something I haven't really thought about to this point. But, now that you mention it, yeah, that pass rush in Tampa, I feel like the way that they disguise their blitzes, it could definitely rattle Kyler. Put a stall on their air attack, and they have I think they have the front seven to really contain Kyler in the pocket, which is another facet of his game. He's so good on the run.
And if that Buccaneers team can rattle the biotic man himself, Jameis Winston, they can for sure rattle Kyler Murray. Last team we got here is a team very near and dear to my heart. A 5-1 team, the Green Bay Packers. They play, and this is a tough stretch. When I was looking at this, putting this together, I thought, golly, these are some tough key games to have. And they've had some good ones already. The 5-1 Packers go to Arizona. They go to Kansas City. They host the Rams. They go to Baltimore. They host the Browns, and they got to play the Vikings twice. And even though the Lions are not great, a Week 18 game against the Lions does not make me happy, because if there's anybody that wants to play spoiler, if the Packers are in that scrape by mode where they may or may not make playoffs, and it might depend on a late game against the Vikings and a late game against the Lions, you better believe both those teams are looking to knock the Packers out. And Dan Campbell, if there are any ankles he wants to eat the most, it's going to be the Packers' ankles, right?
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. So if he can do that, that scares me. But that's a lot of tough games there going towards the end of the season, and some of those biggest ones are away, and that's tough.
Yep. On the road at Arizona, at Kansas City, and at Baltimore. I mean, that's tough.
I will say this: the Packers did make a move to improve their defense, and as soon as Whitney Mercilus got released by the Houston Texans, as soon as it happened, I texted one of my friends and I said, Whitney Mercilus is going to Green Bay. As soon as it happened, because it was clearly a situation where they were releasing a guy that had been with the team for 10 years. One, I remember Whitney Mercilus being drafted, and when they said he'd been with the team for 10 years, I was like, oh, God, I'm old now. So then he got released, and I said, they're releasing him to go to a playoff contender. And I thought Green Bay makes the most sense. They need some help on the edge because of Zadarius Smith being hurt and some uncertainty there. Whitney Mercilus is a good edge rusher, and I think that could help them going forward. So we'll see what happens there. But, I mean, I got to say the Packers are for real, but if there's a schedule that's for real heading into this season, that's one of the most for real schedules we got. So they're going to claw their ways through this tough schedule and make the playoffs, but it's going to be a slog.
The Packers scare me. They've been very shaky against a lot of teams that they should be beating by 2 or 3 touchdowns. You know, it's hard to bet against Aaron Rodgers. Devontae Adams is one of the best receivers in the league. Aaron Jones is great. They might be getting Bakhtiari back pretty soon, I believe. You might know more on that, but players are able to come back from the PUP list this week, so that's something to keep your eye on. Their defense is banged up. You talked about the injury with Zadarius Smith. Jair Alexander's injured. So I feel like they just need to tread water and get by in order to get into the big dance. And then once they're in the playoffs, be the team with the 36, 37-year-old quarterback, the sheriff that nobody wants to face, and just play spoiler to a bunch of teams that have overachieved and had better seasons than them. So I'm going to say that they're for real. But if I had a confidence meter in saying this as opposed to the other teams, then I got to say I'm not feeling great about it, especially given the schedule that we laid out for them. Those 3 road games that we talked about. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, but I feel like he is an even better quarterback. Like his game elevates itself at Lambeau Field. On the road, it's a little bit of a different story. It's like he becomes more human.
And did you see the interaction with the Chicago fans in that game? I still own you. I love that.
It must be a great feeling to talk smack to your rival fans or just your rival in general. I think I saw where he's 28-5 as a quarterback all time versus the Bears. I mean, that's just absurd.
And who knows? He said in a press conference after that, and who knows how much weight this carries and how much this affects what's going to happen. But he said he felt like when asked if that's the last time he's going to be playing the Bears, he said, or play the Bears in that facility, he said, it just didn't feel like the last time. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? They said it's going to be the last dance this year, but who knows what's going to happen? There's a complete mystery there. If it is, it'll be a shame because it's been a heck of a segment for this great historic rivalry, and this. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but it was a great game to see, great rivalry. So let's now move on to a Pickem. We haven't done a Pickem this season so far, and I think it'd be something to kind of throw in here on Thursday for a great barn burner of a Thursday night game against Cleveland and Denver. Wow. So this team, there's so many injuries. There's a chance that both the starting quarterbacks could be out of this game. That doesn't make things great, especially if you're a bettor. And Cleveland has both their halfbacks out, so that's not great. And then 2 of Cleveland's offensive linemen are possibly out. And then there's several other injuries. That Denver has some missing pieces on defense. Cleveland has some missing pieces of everything. And now Case Keenum and Drew Lock could be facing off tonight. Who knows? But I choose Denver to win this. Let's hear what you got.
Players that are absolutely out tonight for Denver: Micah Kaiser, Achilles, he's out. Deshaun Hamilton, ACL. We got Okwuegbunam, the tight end, hamstring. Jerry Jeudy, ankle, he's on IR. Teddy Bridgewater, I believe he's confirmed out now too for Cleveland. You've got Odell. He's always hurt. I mean, he's got an AC joint problem, I think, in his shoulder. Jadeveon has a ankle injury. He might not play. Jack Conklin has a knee injury. He might not play. That's huge, considering that he would be trying to contain Von Miller, if I'm not mistaken. I believe they would line up alongside each other. And, I mean, Cleveland's offensive line is one of the best in the league. It's allowed them to, in my opinion, give Baker Mayfield one of the best opportunities to prove himself. Like, can you imagine if Cleveland had Kyler Murray right now? What would be happening for their offense? I mean,
yeah. So
Kareem Hunt's out. Baker Mayfield, torn labrum, he's out. Nick Chubb, calf injury, he's out. AJ Green, not the wide receiver that we all love that plays for the Cardinals, but AJ Green, the corner, he has a shoulder injury, he's out. Jedrick Wills is questionable with an ankle injury, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah has an ankle injury, and he's on IR. So if you're watching tonight's Thursday night game, I think that you should definitely print out a roster, because otherwise I don't think that you're going to recognize anybody on the field. I have Cleveland winning at home. I think that the dog pound is going to rally around Case Keenum. I think that Case Keenum is a better backup quarterback than
Case Keenum and who? Who else is he?
Case Keenum and company. They got Donovan Peoples-Jones, Jarvis Landry, right? He should be healthy, I believe. Yeah, I mean, with that offensive line, even if you're missing one of Jedrick Wills or Jack Conklin, it's still, I mean, you got Batonio, you got Teller, just some really great pieces. And so I think that their third string running back.
Did you mention Treader? He's out.
That's tough.
That's potentially one hole. That's potentially your tackles, your center. That's rough.
Taking Cleveland at home. The dog.
All right. Well, stick with it. I'm glad you stuck with it. You didn't say, well, technically, if Cleveland does this or that, I'm going to choose Cleveland. So I'm glad you actually picked one this time. That's nice.
Demetric Felton and Ernest Johnson will be their running backs tonight.
That's gotta love that, Demetric Felton. Demetric Felton of South Carolina. If it is of South Carolina, didn't he used to be a? Maybe it's Raymond Felton. Demetric Felton somewhere, somebody else. Never mind then. I was going to drop an info nugget, but I can't do
Demetric
that
Felton
now.
is from Memphis.
Yeah, so I was thinking of somebody else. Never mind. Disregard that.
UCLA.
But did you hear? You're going to like this. But did you hear about what Von Miller said in regards to this game?
Mm.
He said, "I don't know who's going to be blocking me, but I'm going to kill them." uh, and of course, you
So
know how I
bold
feel about
strategy,
statements
Cotton.
like
We'll
that.
see how it pays off for him.
But of course, you know how I feel about that. But then again, he might not want to put his quarterback up on a pedestal like that because, as we know, Myles Garrett may actually kill Drew Lock. So there is only one of those two that has actually violently assaulted someone. So we'll see what happens.
I feel like Myles Garrett is going to be the guy, kind of like Happy Gilmore. When in Happy Gilmore, they tell him that he's the only guy to ever take off his skate, his ice skate, and try to stab somebody with it. That's basically Myles Garrett. He took off. I guess he took off Rudolph's helmet and tried to beat him with it. Not a good look.
Yeah, that was
Hopefully, he's grown as a person.
Yeah, well, if he grows too much more, he might not be human because right now he's just a freak of a man. But yeah, that's you chose Denver. I choose Cleveland. I feel a whole lot more confident about my pick.
No. I chose Cleveland.
Yeah, I chose Denver. You chose Cleveland.
That's not what you just said.
I think that's what I said. Anyway, okay. I'm right. You're
that's
wrong.
Not what you just said.
Okay. Well, we'll look back at the tape and see what I said. But now let's go on and get to our shout-outs here. Got a couple here. We talked about the Bengals and we talked about some of the college football teams here. And the shout-out on offensive line I want to shout out is Evan Neal, tackle for Alabama. This is a massive human being. 6'7". I've seen him listed anywhere from 360 to 370 pounds. Very athletic. He's very much like Mekhi Becton in that he's very athletic for that size, which I think is entirely unfair. I think at my best, I was running like a 4.9 or a 5-second 40 at 220, 5'9 or 5'10 or whatever. And these guys are, running 5'1, 5'2, 40s at 370 pounds. It's just not fair. The world's just not fair. That's just how it is. He has had only a handful of pressures this season and no sacks given up out of I think I saw 480 snaps so far. That's pretty good anytime you do that. And when you're that big.
Against SEC talent.
Especially against some of these teams. Now, we'll see what happens against Georgia when that eventually happens. But that's just really impressive against any sort of college talent, but especially SEC talent. And one of the big knocks against guys that have been that big is that, if they're that big, they get beat underneath pretty quickly because they can't readjust. But this guy's a freak athlete, so he can. And he might end up being the first offensive lineman taken. We've talked about Linderbaum. We've talked about NC State. We talked about all these Texas A&M. We've talked about these offensive linemen that might end up in the first round. But Neal could very well end up being, in a very Mekhi Becton-like way, jump a lot of these guys. So it's going to be interesting once we get around to draft time. But really solid performance so far for Alabama, which not a surprise that Alabama has many good tackles in the past couple of years, and he might be the best one of the few, which is a lot saying since Jedrick Wills came out not too long ago. And then we talked about Cincinnati, and one of the big pieces they brought in, and people had a lot to say about this because they said it wasn't a good pickup. They spent way too much money on Trey Hendrickson. But he's come in. He has 5.5 sacks. He's got a lot of pressures. He's served a pretty solid, pretty important role in that defense. And without Trey Hendrickson, they might not be having the success they're having on defense. So I think Trey Hendrickson deserves a shout-out because people were saying, whoa, he's a product of Cam Jordan. So I don't know if he's going to do that well when he gets paid. And right now he's playing pretty well. And the Saints, on the other side, have had some struggles with their pass rush. Not because he's gone necessarily, but just how it turns out. But shout-out to Trey Hendrickson. Good job, bud.
All right, for my shout-outs, I would like to give a shout-out offensively to Michael Onwenu of the New England Patriots, a second-year guy. Caleb, did you know that he has the highest grade for PFF of second-year offensive players, higher than Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and Justin Jefferson? I mean, that's pretty impressive.
It's very impressive.
And so he's had a big second year for the Patriots. I mean, that offensive line has been banged up. It's been an uphill battle to give Mac the adequate time in the pocket. He got absolutely murdered this past week. But Onwenu isn't the problem there. He's been a solid starter for them, and hopefully he can build off of this season and just be a mainstay anchor for them. And then defensively, I want to talk about a guy from Michigan State. Michigan State's another Big Ten team, kind of like Iowa, that's really stepped up this year, and they're performing really well. I think they're currently ranked in the top 10. And a big part of that is that defense, their defensive line. And Jacob Panasiuk is a guy who leads the NCAA in quarterback pressures. Do you want to guess how many quarterback pressures he has on the season?
I would say 19.
45.
45? Goodness me. I guess I guessed a little bit low there.
You were lowballing him. But, I mean, just for reference, he has 45. Will Anderson Jr. of Alabama, do you want to guess what second place is?
32.
35.
Hey, I was closer on that one.
10 more than the second place guy. And then Mike Tafu, not Tofu, but Tafu of Utah has 33. And then Aiden Hutchinson, another guy that I had shouted out in recent weeks of Michigan, big rivalry. I believe they play next week. He has 30, so he's fourth. So just tremendous pressure off the edge. He kind of reminds me of a guy that didn't really pan out in the NFL, but somebody that was just a huge, huge body coming out of SMU years ago. Had a great combine, and that's Margus Hunt. Big Margus Hunt, man. I was a huge Margus Hunt fan. But yeah,
brilliant combine,
Jacob
if I remember correctly.
One of the best of all time for a D lineman. But yeah, I mean he's great at getting an extension and then using that rip move off the edge to get past the offensive tackles. And he's a huge part of that Michigan State success this season.
Yeah, I think he's got a big podcast too, over in Germany. I think. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know if he was still in the league or what he was doing.
Yeah, I think I heard he got a big podcast over in Germany. But one honorary shout out. We've got our main shout outs here, but I want to say before we leave that honorary shout out to Jamar Chase. We talked about him earlier. I should have mentioned this then. But you see his lead block this weekend to score that touchdown? Great big boy block. And I thought about using him as my shout out, but I was like, he's going to get enough credit anyway, so I'm not going to do that. But I'll give an honorary Hogmolly hustle shout out to Jamar Chase because that was a pretty good block. It was pretty good. It was nice to see. It wasn't super impressive, but he's a wide receiver. What can you expect? But
it's great to see non-linemen do things like that. Like watching. I mean, obviously the Panthers missed Christian McCaffrey for all that he can do offensively, catch the ball, run the ball, all that stuff. But he is such an underrated blocker in the pass game, and a lot of people don't understand just how crucial that is. To where you don't have to go max protect, you can just let the back pick up the blitz up the middle, and give the quarterback adequate time to throw the ball. So it's great to see position players get their hands dirty.
Yeah, and it was something that reminded me of a player comp I saw one of the experts talk about Jamar Chase and say, he reminds me of a supercharged Anquan Bolden. I was like, that block looked a lot like an Anquan Bolden block, so that was pretty nice. And he certainly is supercharged. But that is all we got today. Unless you had any games you wanted to look at for next week.
Yeah, just a couple. looking at the NFL, obviously the Thursday night game is not going to be setting any kind of record, numbers for viewership. Um, but 1 o'clock on Sunday, we've got the Bengals at Baltimore, and that has huge implications on that division race and just the playoffs in general. Also, 1 o'clock, Chiefs visiting the Tennessee Titans. I mean, that's a game that the Chiefs need to win, and it'll be interesting to see if Tennessee can build off that momentum of that Monday night game against Buffalo. We've got Jared Goff making his return to LA to face the Rams. That's at 4:05 Eastern Time. That'll be interesting to watch. Um, and Monday night we have New Orleans traveling to Seattle. So, you know, not the best primetime game there either. But college football. My phone will load. We've got Cincinnati at Navy. We have Oregon visiting UCLA. I think that could be a huge trap game for the Ducks. LSU and Coach Orgeron, who will be finishing out this season and then will take his leave from the Tigers.
Go retire.
Go Tigers. He will be playing Ole Miss, his other former team, this weekend.
That reminds me. Before we move on here, because I want to get this before we leave. Sorry to interrupt you in your spiel here, but I'll forget it. Did you see that Tennessee Ole Miss fiasco? Oh my God! I've never seen anything like that.
Kind of hard to miss. It was everywhere. Instagram, Twitter. Like, I didn't watch the game live, but watching the aftermath, and I mean, you hate it for Tennessee fans, but at the same time, you don't really hate it for Tennessee fans. I mean, they booed the crap out of Lane Kiffin when he was there, and then now that he has jumped around to various different jobs since then and has finally found success at Ole Miss, it's like they hate the guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was watching it live, and I was watching the whole thing, and it just kept going on. I was like, this is ridiculous. They're taking people out. Somebody threw a golf ball and hit Lane Kiffin. He picks up and puts it in his pocket and walks off. And, I mean, there's just all this stuff. We thought maybe the game would get called off. That was wild.
I feel like
I don't think I've seen something
Kiffin,
like that.
He's definitely going to scoop up that golf ball and, like, have it sitting on his desk in his office. Like... That's a good. I mean, think about it. He's going back to Rocky Top and trying, obviously, to get a win for his team. But also, I feel like it's kind of personal because they hate him. I mean, I think he only coached one season there before he split and go to Oakland to coach the Raiders. I think that's what happened. But anyways, it's an interesting relationship there between Tennessee and Lane Kiffin.
Well, and then the whole thing is, like, Kiffin almost lost that game there after that. When everything resumed, it was, for a second there we thought, oh man, this might actually end up working. That's going to be crazy.
What blew my mind more than anything was the fact that the Tennessee quarterback decided to run out of bounds as time expired. Yeah. Didn't even, like, put up a prayer in the end zone and try to plow through people for a 25-yard touchdown. Didn't do anything like that. He just ran out of bounds.
Yeah, I was like, that stinks.
Poor situational awareness, and that's not the first time we've seen that this season.
Nope. Now, do you have any more games to talk about? I know I cut you off there and ruined your train of thought, but I had to talk about that.
That's really kind of it. I mean, it's kind of a down week in college football. We got USC at Notre Dame, Ohio State at Indiana. That could be a trap game. Oklahoma State at Iowa State. That could be. I think that could be a upset alert because. Obviously, Iowa State has not lived up to expectations this season, but I mean they're still 4-2, and I mean their losses are Iowa and Baylor. So, I mean, neither one of those are head scratching losses. So, that's a tough environment to play at, and I could definitely see Oklahoma State getting rattled this weekend. So,
yeah, so it'll be interesting to want to watch here. Well, we're getting towards our limit here, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug on this one. But first, I want to thank anybody that stuck around and watched this. At any point, if you happen to watch this and maybe you hopped around, came back in, but if you liked any of it, be nice, give us a like. Don't give us a thumbs down. Leave a comment if you agreed or disagree with anything we got. Subscribe and tickle that bell icon if you're watching us on YouTube, which is currently the only place we can get this because I'm incompetent and I can't put it anywhere else. But we're working on it. It's all a process. But again, thank you for watching. Make sure you share, spread the love, because we love when people come and watch our stuff. We love sharing these ideas with people. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching, and we'll be back next week. Peace!